It's match day in the Premier League. Arsenal take on Manchester City, looking to deal a rather big blow to Pep Guardiola's title hopes. 3 defeats, perhaps, in the first 5 games, whereas for the Arsenal, it's all about getting yet another victory and maybe another clean sheet. This game is a knife edge for Arsenal. Success, and you've landed yourself a brilliant start to your first 5 games. Lose, and there are big questions that are faced. That's the nature of football. This is today's Arsenal News Show. Hello and welcome to the Gooner Talk, back again with you guys for another episode of what is the Arsenal News Show, joining every single morning at 8 a.m. UK time. Thank you so much as always for joining me and making this a part of your morning routines. It is greatly appreciated. I hope you're doing good. I hope you're doing well. I hope you've had an enjoyable Saturday and that you're ready for a Sunday of action, of course, with Arsenal involved again in one of the biggest games of the start of this season, which has been the case for much of the campaign already and is not going away anytime soon. Already gone to Old Trafford, already gone to Anfield. They must now host their other title rivals and then go to St James's Park, of course, next week as well, amongst a clash in the lower leagues with Port Vale. But all that is to come. But today we focus, of course, on the matter at hand, which is this huge clash against Manchester City. Good morning to those of you joining us live in the chat box. Thank you so much as always for doing so. Good morning to Glenn and Rob. We've got Matt G, we've got Ange, we've got Kim, we've got Grantley Poos, we've got Loga and Alex, we've got Peter, we've got Roy, we've got Jakob, we've got Rob. Good morning to you all. Thank you so much as always for making this a part of your morning routines. And those of you listening, of course, on catch up as well. Thank you to all of you. You are all also greatly appreciated. We've got some regulars and I'm hoping we've got some irregulars as well in the chat box today. Let us know if you're joining us for one of your first shows as well. One of the people who isn't joining us for one of their first shows is Alfie, who's been a member now for 17 months on the channel, closing in on that 2-year anniversary. Thank you for your support, mate. Greatly appreciated. Right. Let's jump, though, into today's slides. And then, of course, we'll get on to the matter of the, you know exactly what we've got coming up. We've got, of course, the preview ahead of the game against Manchester City to worry about as well. But yes, the Premier League, of course, had plenty to discuss yesterday. Some controversies, some interesting scorelines. Liverpool, of course, put the pressure still back on Arsenal, 6-point gap already. But, of course, with a game in hand that Arsenal have today against City, they managed to beat Everton in their Merseyside derby 2-1. Another tight game, another unconvincing victory for Liverpool, it must be said. Brighton drawing 2-2 with Spurs. They went 2-0 down, did Spurs, and managed to come back to 2-2. Burnley got Ange Postecoglou's first point on the board after a 1-1 draw with Forest. Crystal Palace won at West Ham in one of the London derbies of course, this week. Manchester United beat Chelsea 2-1 with both teams going down to 10 men in one of the more comical games at the start of this season. Robert Sanchez being sent off inside the first 5 minutes before Casemiro then being sent off, I think, before half-time to level the playing field, but not the scoreline. Cole Palmer coming off in that game, injured again. Fulham managed to get a really important victory for them in a West London derby with Brentford. And, of course, moving into today's games, we've got Bournemouth against Newcastle. We've got Sunderland against Aston Villa. And, of course, we've got Arsenal against Manchester City. Plenty of massive games. I think did I even mention Leeds beating Wolves as well? I forgot that one yesterday as well. And a very damaging result, of course, for Wolves, who are, of course, still very much down in the bottom of the table. And what that does to the Premier League and where that sets things up in the Premier League is Arsenal currently sit in 3rd place. Spurs have managed to overhaul them for now with that point at Brighton, but Arsenal will move above them with either a win or a draw, but Arsenal, of course, will be aiming for a victory. Palace's win moves them up to 4th in the table. Very impressive start for Palace. Fulham as well, and Bournemouth already in the top 10. Sunderland still sitting in 8th place. They play today. A very impressive start to their season, but at the bottom, Wolves very much down there. That game between Sunderland and Aston Villa is very important for Unai Emery, who I don't think has yet scored a goal at the start of this season in the Premier League. Kind of ridiculous when you think about that. West Ham also very much in trouble now in 18th place, and Graham Potter is his position no longer tenable. From an Arsenal perspective and into the youth sides, the under-18s managed to get a victory over Ipswich, winning 4-2 in their respective game. We had goals from Cader O'Neill and 2 from Kyron Thompson, and Brando Niall Bailey-Joseph also got a goal in that game, but Arsenal did get a red card in that game and went down to 10 men, but still managed to hold on with it being a late red in the 85th minute as well. And Max Dowman broke yet more records for the Arsenal. He dropped down to the Arsenal under-21s. Of course, he's not been playing as much recently. He did play a couple of Premier League appearances, but with the players coming back from injury, Arsenal getting the likes of Hincapié and Norgard into the squad, there's hope that, the likes of Ben White, Bukayo Saka, Martin Odegaard will be back soon. Will they be back today? Difficult to tell. Arteta really didn't make anything definitive in his press conference on Friday, but that does mean that the space for Dowman in the squad is not there at the moment, which means that he needs to play, and it's good that he is playing, and he did indeed score for Arsenal's under-21s. It was a very late victory for the Gunners, with Andre Harriman and Noose having already scored, scoring a 99th minute penalty. But Dowman's goal makes him the youngest ever under-21s player in Arsenal's history. He's 15 years of age. Look, he needs to play games. And if Arsenal's senior squad, which had serious injuries at the start of the season, hadn't yet signed a couple of the players like Eza and Hincapié, when, of course, he made his debut against Manchester United. Of course, no, sorry, not against Manchester, against Leeds United. It makes sense that, therefore, he plays regularly still if he's not getting the minutes for the senior team. But I imagine he'll have a good chance of getting into the squads against Port Vale on Wednesday. At least we would certainly hope that he has a good chance of getting into that squad as well, unless there are needs to get injured players or players that have been injured back into the fold. Arsenal's women's team take on Manchester United a little bit later on today as well. They go to Manchester to play at 10-3, which is an odd kickoff time, but they're playing at 10-3 in the afternoon. Well, let's go to part 3. Sorry, why am I jumping ahead so far? We're going to go to part 3 soon. Don't worry on your questions. We're going to go to part 2, which is going to be a little mini preview ahead of today's game against Manchester City. Right, let's go to part 3. Oh, for goodness sake, I can't stop saying it. Let's go to part 2 and tackle, of course, the Arsenal preview against Manchester City. It's going to be a very interesting game, of course. A lot on the line for both teams. Both teams without key players, injured, not available for this game. There's been a lot of talk, a lot of mind games from both managers, I think, going into this one. More so from Pep, of course, as well. And we're going to get some of your thoughts and predictions, of course, for this as well. But let's take a look at the lineup that I personally would go for in this game. And I'm not changing too much, but I am taking advantage of the form that we saw from Gabriel Martinelli in midweek. I did ask Mikel Arteta, of course, directly whether or not the form of Trossard and Martinelli would have to feature in his thinking going into this game. And I'm hoping that indeed we do get to see some kind of knock-on effects, if you like, through those games, or the game against Athletic Club that Martinelli and Trossard both scored in, and they will have an impact again in this game. But overall, the team for me is Raya, Timber. With Saliba not yet having played, I think I'm very comfortable with Mosquera playing right-sided centre-half. Gabriel, left-sided centre-half. Calafiori at left-back. Zubamendi in the midfield with Declan Rice. Eza moving into a central position with Odegaard not yet fully fit and back into the team yet, meaning Martinelli can play off the left flank. Gyökeres through the middle, and of course, Noni Madueke on the right-hand side. I'm expecting some really interesting battles. Of course, Gabriel Haaland being reinvigorated, reignited that rivalry between those two. Going to have to see how Dejani Reinders appreciates his first battle at the Emirates in a Manchester City shirt as well. And of course, will the likes of Jurriën Mosquera be able to keep Jeremy Doku quiet? Whoever's going to play on the right, is it going to be Oscar Bob? Is it going to be Bernardo Silva? What tactical decisions is Pep going to try and make to win this game? Is the Emirates Stadium going to be a frenetic atmosphere. It was quite quiet against Nottingham Forest, it being an early kickoff, but with it being a 4:30, you'd hope that plenty of fans have been able to get into the pubs in the ground and around it as well, and ready for this kickoff so that they can create quite the atmosphere ahead of what is a very, very big game for the Gunners. Let's get some of your predictions, though, in the chat box. Canu's going for a 2-0 Arsenal victory. Lowe's going for a 2-1 Arsenal win. So is Aris Silky as well. Mohammed's going big with a 4-1 Arsenal victory. Granddaddy Gooner Paul says 3-1. Jokeres, Martinelli, and Rice with the goals as well. Natalie's going for a 3-1 Arsenal victory too. We've got Ranted also says 3-1. Jokeres, Madueke, Rice. Jonas is going big, 6-0. The Swedish beast with a hat-trick. Noni, Eze, and Gabby. Big Gabby, that is, with a header from a corner. Vacan says 2-0. Jackie's going for a 2-1 win. Charles is going for a 3-2 win. City first. Arsenal equalise after a 2-1 lead and a 3-1. And then City puts one back with 5 minutes to go, making us a little nervous. Barry says 3-1. Clint says 2-1. Olu says 1-0. Steve 3-0. Kirill 3-0. Jade, no reckon it's going to be a 1-1 draw. Maybe it's some reverse psychology, Temi style. Loss says 3-1 to the Arsenal. Henka Ho says 5-0. Ian says 1-0 or 2-1. We have to win. Maximius is going for a 3-1 win as well, whereas John going for the 2-0. I'll continue to throw up some of your scorelines while we go to part 3. Your questions and more right after this. Right, this is part... Oh, goodness me. What have I done that for? I've put an overlay on the screen rather than the background. There we go. Goodness, I'm not with it today. I don't know why. I'm not feeling it clearly. I'm just making all these mistakes while covering the show. But it seems a lot of you are quite positive about the results that you're hoping to see a little bit later on. And of course, I would like to point out a couple of things as well just before we go into the questions as well. One thing I pointed out in yesterday's show, that there is a confidential drop-in service with the NHS mental health specialist nurse at the Arsenal Hub, which you can find at 56 Benmore Road, N77BA, and for every Premier League home match as well moving forwards. Also, it'll be open 2 hours before kickoff, and then, of course, during the match, 2 hours after full time. Now, I want to get your thoughts on something and get some of your thoughts in the chat box, because I am displeased, is probably the most polite way of putting it, yesterday while I was had an hour to myself and was scrolling kind of through social media and seeing some of the reaction and some of the thoughts, not just around Arsenal, but around the weekend as well. And one of the unfortunate things that I sadly scrolled upon was a video of Rory Jennings on TalkSport. Now, I've done some stuff with Rory Jennings in the past and have appeared on his show on TalkSport in the past as well. And I won't be in the future. Reason being, and it follows on, of course, from that last slide that I just showed you, and the importance, of course. And we're very passionate here about mental health. We're very passionate about ensuring that people get the support they need, no matter their background, no matter their anything, no matter their context, employment, whatever. And obviously, there's been a lot made this week around Chelsea and Raheem Sterling and Axel Disasi as well, and the treatment of both of those players, and the fact that they are, of course, not currently training with the first team squad. And it's become a bit of a story because Enzo Maresca has used an analogy of his father, who, as a fisherman, would get up at a ridiculous hour and work ridiculous hours. And that was the kind of justification used for what a hard job is. And I empathize with that story. And I think there is relevance of that story when it comes to talking about footballers, of course, who earn a lot of money. And if they're not playing, they're still earning a lot of money. However, the discussion around the treatment of those Chelsea players, and particularly the question mark about the players' mental health. Now, Raheem Sterling is a player, of course, who has dealt with some awful stories and coverage of him throughout the course of his career, and has had to deal with systemic racism, certainly, throughout his career. I can't speak with much experience about Axel Disasi's, of course, experiences, but certainly you all should be aware of the treatment, particularly of Raheem Sterling as a player and as a black man. And I think that what I heard and have been hearing beyond just those words of what Rory spoke of on TalkSport yesterday, I believe it was yesterday or the day before, about this idea that Chelsea or anyone doesn't need or a complete disregard for any type of mental health support being given to a footballer because of what they earn, or that we can't make the kind of similarities or the comparisons between somebody who has a quote unquote normal job compared to a footballer. I just found mental, especially when you think about the fact that we've sadly lost over the course of many years, many footballers, many footballers, very sadly, who have taken their own lives. You know, I'm thinking of Robert Enker, I'm thinking of Gary Speed when I think about these players who very sadly have taken their own lives. Mental health is important in any profession at all. And I just found it so disregarding of mental health in a context related to somebody who earns a lot of money. No matter how much money you earn, it doesn't mean that you are not therefore vulnerable to the effects of going through some very tough periods personally. No amount of money can ever help recover somebody from some very personal situations that affects them beyond just what is physical. And I just thought the disregard for a player's mental health around a topic of how much money they earn was just so hollow, so inconsiderate. I struggled to make it through the whole video. I did for the purposes of being fully informed on what was said, but I'm just making it clear on here that I won't be doing any shows that involve Rory going forwards, because while I was happy to before and we had disagreed on opinions such as kits and adults wearing kits and things like that, and more trivial, jovial topics, that's just an opinion, as is this. But this opinion carries certain weight, and until there is, in my opinion, some acknowledgement that the mental health element and aspect, when of course talking about somebody's wage is taken, I just can't ever consider associating myself on a radio show or an interview or a YouTube show or whatever in any way with someone who disregards things like that. I just couldn't. And I couldn't sit and not say anything on here either, because we talk about mental health on here all the time. It is a really important part and pillar of this particular community. In our Discord server, for our members, of course, we have the channels dedicated to just Let's Talking. You can speak to people on here. You can share things. You can be as private as you want, but I just can't. I just can't get on board with comments that disregard mental health in any way, shape, or form. On the footballing side, let's just take the footballing context of this for a second. I couldn't care less what either of Raheem Sterling or Axel Disasi earn. The fact that they've been kind of put to one side and are training with the youth team or training at some other hours of the day at the training ground away from the senior team, I find kind of strange. I'd love to know your thoughts on this, because if it was like Fabio Vieira, right, or Albert Sambi Lokonga, I feel as though had they have stayed at Arsenal beyond the end of the transfer window, do you agree that they would still be involved with the Arsenal senior team in training? And would be throughout the course of this until January. I can't help but think that both Vieira and Lokonga, or Reece Nelson, players, of course, that didn't leave until deadline day and were very much on the outskirts of kind of the Arsenal first team, and were never really in contention to play senior football for Arsenal this season. I can't think of an example, and I'd be happy to be proven wrong. I cannot think of an example where any Arsenal player, if they're not featuring regularly in the first team or are not in the first team plans, are for some reason kind of shunned to the reserves or shunned to the youth team. There's been times where players have been had to train with the youth team for other reasons. You think about Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang, of course, but that wasn't because of just simply they didn't get a move. Do you know what I mean? Like the Aubameyang situation is not comparable to the Sterling or the Disasi situation as far as I'm aware. So that was very much a different thing, and obviously a culmination of, I think, what was the words that Arteta used? Was it breaches in standards, I guess, or breaches of discipline, or some? It was some kind of phrasing that was put, but that I can't think of. I just can't think if it was Arsenal or even just Arteta in Maresca's situation, I can't see players of a senior level who are earning a lot of money, who are still an asset to the club, and if there was an injury crisis, they would be called upon, be forced to train with the reserves or with the youth team. I can't think of it happening if it was in that situation. So yeah, someone's asked about Özil. I don't know if he was. I don't think when Özil kind of had his time away from the team where he wasn't playing, I don't know if he was training on his own or was training with the youth team. And again, it seemed like it was a different scenario, didn't it? It seemed like with the Özil situation, and there is obviously a lot unsaid about the Özil situation that we're still, until I guess Özil talks about it more openly and with more detail, we won't know. But what we were told is that it was footballing reasons. There were footballing reasons why Özil wasn't both, of course, registered. I guess there's another example. I guess is Kolasinac another example? I feel like Kolasinac or Socrates weren't registered. Let me just have a quick check. Socrates not registered. I'm doing this on the fly now because some things are coming to me. Arsenal teammate terminate contract of Socrates. That happened in January. But yeah, I mean, I don't think Socrates was registered in September. But maybe you know better than me. But I don't know if he still did train. Matt says Özil was training with the squad, but just wasn't selected for the team each week. I think this is right. I'm pretty sure this is correct, right? I think Özil and Socrates both left in that January window that followed after they both weren't registered in the squad. But I'm pretty sure they still trained with the first team. I'm pretty sure they were still training with the first team. But, of course, these again there's something to be said about the effort that was supposedly being observed by Arteta and others that led, sadly, to that situation going the way that it did. Lynn says, the only time that I would expect a player to train away from the first team is if they are disrupting the rest of the group. And, of course, we've not heard anything to suggest that Sterling or Disasi have done that. And until we do, that's all the context that we have right now. Vacan says, at least we were willing to take the cost of terminating their contracts, but it seems that Chelsea won't. Natalie says the same with Trossard and De Zerbi. A good, of course, he came to Arsenal. I think there were some disagreements there, wasn't there, between Trossard and De Zerbi, but of course he got that move in the end and Arsenal paid the money required to get Trossard out of Brighton. It was only £21 million up front. I think it was a deal that went up to 27 million, which I imagine Arsenal probably paid a chunk of, at least since that move as well. I know what you're saying about kind of the political side of things with the Özil, and I think there is certainly some context around that are fair, but I don't know. I don't know the finer details of that element. I don't know the finer details of what happened. And again, until we hear from the man himself specifically on that front, it's difficult to kind of speculate, isn't it, without having the facts. All we do know, and what we do know from, of course, the reports that came out, is the footballing reasons, headlines that we got at the time that I remember, like it's imprinted in the back of my mind as well. But again, until there is an interview with Özil who talks specifically about it, I guess we'll have to wait, unless I've missed it and you guys can find it. And the Chalobah incident, the Chalobah one's really weird as well, because of course Chalobah left Chelsea, went to Palace, and then was called back by Chelsea and was willing to reintegrate into the squad, maybe because obviously it was a different manager. I think Enzo Maresca, while he's a decent coach, I think there are some real question marks about him as a manager. And I'm not sure that he is the person that will take Chelsea back to where they want to go and to winning trophies on a regular occasion. I know he's won the Conference League last season, but quite frankly, I think we can all agree that if he hadn't have won it, it was almost a sackable offence not winning the Conference League as Chelsea manager with the amount of money they've got. So, I do think there is an element of that. And just saying, says, however, Ozil does indeed still speak well about Arsenal in interviews. Vaka says, speaking of Ozil, haven't heard him speak of Arsenal since we lost 5-0. So I don't know if that's accurate. I think he has spoken about Arsenal, and in interviews has spoken quite fondly of them. So I don't think that that's necessarily fair. Jonas says, which manager will lose their job first, Potter or Amorim? Oh, it's got to be Potter. I mean, Amorim's just won a game against Chelsea. Surely Potter has got to go. Like, he's got to go. To quote Wilson, I just can't see a world where Graham Potter survives now. It just seems he has to. Surely he has to absolutely go because the pressure on him is just too great. Too great. City says, great show, Tom. So happy I found your channel. Always a level-headed approach to the team and game. Thank you, mate. It's very kind of you. Emery. Yeah, less said about Emery, the better. Manny says, with Ødegaard not being fit to start today, do you think Arteta goes with the same midfielder used in midweek? I'll be honest with you, Manny. I think there's a good chance. I think there's a really good chance that we see Marino, Rice as a B today, and Ezra on the left again. I think there's a really good chance. I hope that we don't. Not because I think it wouldn't win us the game. I think we could still win the game with that midfield. But I think there's a really good chance that we may not see Ezra in the middle and still see Marino there. So, again, we'll have to wait and see what happens. And yes, Sterling's son is with the Arsenal Academy at the moment as well. He hasn't been successful anywhere. Who? Are we talking about Potter? I mean, if we are talking about Potter, he had a good time with Swansea and with Ostersund's as well, but obviously not with Chelsea and not with West Ham. But maybe you're talking about someone else. Just saying, says, what about the card given in the Liverpool game for the quick free kick? Yes. Did you see this? Jack Grealish certainly did, and Jack Grealish was very outspoken after the game on the decision. It's one of the silliest choices. I don't know why the referee feels that he has to book a player for taking a free kick too quickly. I mean, come on. What's going on? I also saw a lot of people looking at the added time that's been given in games where Liverpool are winning compared to games where Liverpool are not winning. I'm just highlighting a fact. I'm just highlighting a stat that you might want to go and check out. No ulterior motives there. Just highlighting a fact that you might want to go and read. Ian says, are you going to be worried for Calafiori versus Silva or Savinho or Oscar Bobs? More so than the region between Calafiori and Gabriel. That's where City like to hurt us. I'd say I am go and watch the game against Liverpool. Because while I may have had some worries about Salah against Calafiori, those worries certainly diminished rather quickly. So that game gave me all the confidence in the world that Calafiori can cope with those issues and those challenges. With Gabriel next to him, Zubimendi, of course, and Rice on that side, you could argue too, we should be pretty good. Let's go to Mike. He says, we are at the beginning of a journey this season. It's too early to twist with the lineup. Ezra should start out wide. Marino in the middle against Rodri. Mikey thinks that we should carry on with that lineup. I don't know how many people, if the majority would agree with you or not on that front. Samuel says, did you see the horrific onside decision that meant one Man United goals counted? United's player's arm was entirely over the offside line, which was shown on the onside animation still given. I thought that Chalobah's leg was inside, was it not? Let me have a look. Let me just quickly play this back while we're talking, because I thought the replay showed, because obviously the arm is not what is offside. The arm is offside only up until the point where the captain's armband would be. Okay, I can see it now. So it's saying that the foot of Chalobah is enough of where the arm, so that the rule is it's where the bottom of the armpit is on the arm. So where the bottom of the armpit reaches your arm length, that's where the line is. And they're saying that Bruno Fernandes was indeed, the amount of his arm that can be offside was behind Chalobah's foot. So I can only go with that image. I'm not sure. I'm not sure. You, I think he's onside. I don't want to see someone offside for their arm. Really, I don't think it's a. I think the fact that any of your arm could be offside is a little silly. Senki says Eze is so wasted in this setup. What a waste of talent. I mean, I don't think we saw a waste of talent against Nottingham Forest, did we? Max Days Black says Brighton players kicking the ball away and not getting booked. Yeah, I mean, it seems that was a rule for last season and not anymore. Ken says, name one City player you would have had in the Arsenal team, preferably not Haaland. I mean, the only other player is Rodri, because Rodri is the only other player I think who is better than our current number 6. And I'll tell you what, it's swinging a very, very different way, I think, over the next a few months. I think we could see a shift, at least the next couple of seasons, but we could potentially see another shift. I mean, some people would argue Donnarumma. I personally wouldn't. I think David Raya is as good as Donnarumma in the sticks, and certainly better with his distribution, but I think he's as good of a goalkeeper overall. I think Donnarumma is a slightly better shot stopper, but I think that Raya is a significantly better distributor of the ball. Not Foden. Foden's not been good for about 3 years. So I don't know where Foden's coming into this. He's not been good for about 3 years, people. He's had an all right start to this season, but again, Foden has just not been the level that we saw in 22-23 or 21-22. So that Foden, I think, is just nowhere near the level he was. Fizzy says added time is a FN of what time wasted. If Liverpool aren't winning, surely most teams would time waste. But if Liverpool are winning, teams would hurry up to try and get back on level terms. Well, that would be true if there wasn't several yellow cards given out and all of the substitutions made in the second half to somehow constitute just 3 added minutes. I just cannot agree with that added time that was given either. Paul says, if I was Disasi and Sterling, I'd see out my contract and bank the cash. Seems stupid not integrating players you don't want to use because you're still paying them. And not only that, but they sold them the project when they arrived. They've convinced them to sign for the club. Yes, they've signed players since then, but they can be an asset to you still. They can be an asset to you in training. One of the big reasons that Sterling arrived at Arsenal late on and why Arsenal made that signing is because of his impact in the dressing room as an experienced player. You had young players like Ethan Waneri and Miles Lewis-Skelly looking up to Raheem Sterling as a player who has been through so much throughout his career, of course, as well. And that was one of the benefits that, despite he didn't offer us, unfortunately, too much on the field, it was seen, and certainly my understanding was that he had incredible value off the field for Arsenal last season, and especially to many of the young players who were something of a, seen as something of a role model to those players as well. Did you see the football social combined 11? Doku over Eze. I hate combined 11s. I think they're just rage baiting, right? Combined 11s, I do think they're just rage baiting, sadly. John says, Raya is one of the best keepers in the world right now. I'd argue that all day long with anyone. I think Donnarumma is an excellent shot stopper, arguably the best shot-stopping keeper in the world, maybe. But as an all-rounded goalkeeper, of course, he lacks certain elements that stop him, I think, from eclipsing Raya. Patrick says, to be fair to him, I thought the way that a lot of reputable Arsenal content creators and YouTubers spoke about Sterling last season was disgusting. That was never called out. I mean, give me an example, Patrick. I'd love to know what you mean. Obviously, regarding Sterling in terms of his contributions, he ultimately just wasn't and isn't, and it hasn't been at the level that people have expected from Sterling for a long time. That first season with Chelsea was kind of the last year that we saw of Sterling who could contribute a lot, but unfortunately in last season, and yeah, you're probably fair to point out some people would have spoke about him rather disparagingly, but at the same time, think about some Arsenal fans also spoke about Madueke before he'd even kicked a ball for Arsenal as well. Nathan says, be interesting to see where the MLS plays versus Port Vale. Miles Lewis-Skelly, if he's going to play a midfielder at left back, or will Hincapié play? Lynn says, Tom, with all the depth in the Arsenal squad, don't you think that Arteta should hold back on starting Saka and Odegaard? Yes, he should be. He doesn't need to rush them back. We don't need to rush them back. We can afford to not have to do that. Patrick says they would laugh. They would laugh at the prospect of him being in the starting lineup. It seemed like borderline bullying, in my opinion. Again, it's not really that different, is it, Patrick, to what we've come to expect? I don't think it's that different to what we come to expect from many about a lot of players. Doesn't mean it's right, and it's certainly your right to call it out, but it's in by way no means surprising, and that's a sad fact. Johnson Sterling, unfortunately, is the player that he's not the player that he was, but let's not forget that he was once a great player. Oh, he'll go down as one of the Premier League's best, Raheem Sterling. Yeah, unfortunately, the end of his career and these kind of years of his career have simply not been anywhere close to what he achieved. But we're talking about a serial Premier League winner and a player, of course, who achieved amazing things with Manchester City. So you can't take away what he achieved with them. You just can't. He will go down as one of the best Premier League players from his time with Manchester City because he just was. I just remember the days where he was in everyone's fantasy team. You could not move without someone having Sterling in their fantasy team. Garrett says Marino Rice hasn't worked yet. I feel like it's what Arteta will do again today. I wish he was more daring with his selections, but I wonder what you think. See you later at the game. See you later, Garrett. I think that's the most likely lineup for us, but that you're right. I think there has been some teething issues. I think we'd lack some central penetration with those three. I think that we need to use Eze in the 10 role today with Martinelli on the left. So I hope that's what we see. But Arteta might feel that with what we're up against, we need to use Marino, Rice, and Zubi to win that midfield battle. I mean, we've lost one game, we've won one game. We're starting that midfield. So let's see if indeed that midfield can win a rather impressive game as well. So he says, do you agree that Trossard should start on the left here with Eze in for Odegaard? No, for me, it'd be Martinelli. I think Trossard is proven to be far more consistently impactful from the bench rather than from the start, whereas Martinelli, you want to use that form, that confidence, that belief that he got from the game in midweek, and I'd use that, and I'm going to try and harness that moving forwards. Couple more comments before we wrap up. Would you sell Saliba in January if he doesn't sign a new deal? I mean, I don't expect him to not sign a new deal. I feel pretty good about Saliba's contract prospects at the moment, so I'm not even thinking about selling it. Of course, I think it's important that Arsenal would get money for him rather than him leaving on a free in just over a year's time, in just under 2 seasons' time. But I'm not even really thinking about that at the moment. John says, I think as we are at home, I don't think this midfield will be Zubi, Rice and Marino, I think, and hope that it will be Waneri or Eze at 10. Ike says, if we start with the midfield three of Marino, Zubi and Rice, Mikel has to give Eze and Madueke the license to roam and create chances. How Klopp allowed Mane, Salah and Firmino when they had 3 centre mids playing as well. Morgan says, have you discussed today's referee? No, I haven't. We kind of touched on it yesterday, didn't we? Stuart Atwell takes charge of his first Arsenal game for 2 years since that infamous game against Newcastle at St James's Park. Let's hope that the referee has zero impact on this game in any negative context. We can only keep our fingers crossed, can't we? And Jared Gillett, of course, on VAR as well. So, you couldn't write him. Anyway, thank you so much as always for listening. Really appreciate your time. I'll be back with you bright and early tomorrow morning to do a roundup, of course, of all of the action from today's game. We're keeping the fingers crossed that it is going to be quite the exciting fixture for Arsenal. I hope you have an enjoyable Sunday. Stay safe, stay well, stay happy and respectful. And as always, up the Arsenal.